Welcome to Beyond the Mask. Today, we're honored to introduce a guest whose mission hits close to home, Devin Holt, a CRNA and a true crusader against type 1 diabetes. Through his powerful online presence and growing Facebook community of nearly 13,000 followers and 84,000 followers on TikTok, Devin has become a passionate content creator and advocate, spreading awareness, education, and hope in the fight to cure type 1 diabetes. Joining me for this special conversation today is my daughter, Danielle, who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at just 5 years old. Together, we'll explore the realities of life with type 1, the evolving science behind treatment and prevention, and the incredible online movement that Devin has built to inspire and connect others living with diabetes. This episode is all about resilience, advocacy, and the power of community, a heartfelt look at what it means to turn personal challenges into a mission for change. Welcome, Devin and Danielle. How are you guys?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Before we get started, I have to tell you how I found you. Danielle actually found you first.
A little
and
bit of
she-
a fangirl, so.
A little bit. Are you kidding? You stalked him and then you called me and she said, he says he's an anesthesia provider. I don't know if he's an anesthesiologist or a nurse anesthetist. He hasn't said which he is so far. And so then she calls me back. She goes, yay, he's a nurse anesthetist, Mom. He said it. He's a nurse anesthetist. And do you know him? I go, no, I don't know him. I don't think I know him. And then she looked on my Facebook page and we're friends. She sends me the screenshot and she is right. We are friends on Facebook. She said, you got to have him on your podcast. So that's how you're here.
Awesome. I'm so glad that you saw some of my videos, Danielle.
Yeah, I found that it really resonated with me, especially when you're talking about handing the power over from a diabetic to your CRNA during major surgeries. As my mother knows, I've had multiple surgeries, and out of all of those, I've only ever had one ask me about my insulin pump and how my body reacts, and we kind of did a deep dive, and that was one of the first videos that I saw of yours. And I was like, oh my God, this is like so valid. I felt, kind of powerless in that situation, going into surgery, not knowing what's going to happen. And then, like I said, that one particular CRNA provided confidence in me before I went in for my big eye surgery. So I think it's great information, and I can't wait to see what else you put out.
Yeah, it's something that not a lot of people think about, how terrifying it is for someone with type 1 diabetes to have surgery and to not only give up control because they're going to be under anesthesia, but give up the control of their most prized possession, their blood sugar, to a complete stranger. I can't imagine how that feels as a person with type 1 diabetes, because I don't have type 1 diabetes, but my daughter does. And I can tell you how it feels as a parent, because my daughter just had surgery a few weeks ago.
My goodness. Well, tell us the journey that you've been on. Tell us about when your daughter was diagnosed and how you decided to start your online presence.
Sure. My daughter, Caroline, she is 6 years old now. She was diagnosed with type 1 when she was 11 months old. And these babies, first of all, it's very uncommon to be diagnosed before the age of 1. There's a percentage of kids that get diagnosed between 2 and 4, and then 4 and 6, and so on and so forth. But before 1, it's quite low, and it's very uncommon. It doesn't happen a lot in hospitals. The hospital I went to was woefully unprepared for the age of my daughter with this diagnosis. And they readily admitted that they hadn't had a baby that young. They couldn't even remember the last time. So physiologically, they just fall off a cliff really fast. I noticed the night before I took her into the hospital, her breathing had picked up just a little bit. Her respiratory rate was a little higher than normal, and it sounded just the tiniest bit coarse to me. And I remember commenting to my wife, I said, we should watch her breathing, because it seems like she might be coming down with something, maybe RSV or something. It was RSV season at the time. And so we put her to bed. And the next morning, she woke up and had completely fallen off that physiological cliff. She was breathing 60 times a minute.
Oh, my goodness.
I immediately rushed her to the ER. Type 1 diabetes was nowhere on our radar. We have no family history, and I'm sure you guys know better than anyone that somewhere in the 70 to 90% range of new diagnoses have no family history. Depending on the source you get that data from, it's really high. Most people have no family history, but of course there is a strong genetic component. If you have type 1, there is an increased chance of passing that on to your kids. But just speaking of diagnoses out of the blue, the great majority, 3/4 plus, do not have a family history. And we fell into that category. So it wasn't even on the radar. It took the ER doctor 3 hours to diagnose us. And that only happened when her lab result came back critical with a blood sugar of over 600. It was the worst day of my life. Her pH was 0.9. And
Were you already a CRNA at
yeah,
that?
I was, yeah. I had just gotten home from a work trip the day before this happened, and she was 11 months old. Kids who are a little older, first of all, physiologically, they have a bit more of a buffer, and it's easier to pick up on the increased urination and drinking and weight loss. But for a baby who's breastfeeding constantly has wet diapers and barely weighs anything as it is, it's extremely difficult to pick it up in a baby that young. So we were very lucky to pick it up at all, honestly. And our doctor told us that she was about 6 hours from dying by the time we took her into the ER, and that we had barely gotten there in time. So yeah, worst day of my life. We had to take an ambulance ride to another hospital nearby that was better equipped for her. She fought for her life there for several days in the ICU. So that's her diagnosis story. And it has really turned our life upside down. It's one of the most difficult diseases to manage in the world on a day-to-day basis, knowing that your child could potentially die from a low blood sugar at any time of day, and that if their blood sugar is too high, it's causing internal damage to several body systems. It's a stress that nobody should ever have to be under, and it's constant, and there's no breaks, there's no weekends or holidays off. Getting a full night's rest is a luxury as a parent of a baby with type 1 diabetes or anyone who suffers from the disease.
Do you have other children, Devin?
Yeah, we have 5 kids. Caroline is number 4 out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 3 girls and 2 boys.
Okay. And how long ago has this been since she was diagnosed? Did I miss that? How old is she now?
She's 6 now, so she's
You did
been
say that.
pregnant for about 5.5 years now.
Wow.
My question for you, I am the youngest of 3. I am the lucky lottery winner of having the only one out of us 3 to have diabetes. However, my siblings help me. They know my symptoms, like my sister and brother both know that when I start crying obsessively and saying I'm sorry, they're like, her blood sugar is low. Oh, she's being.
Danielle's a twin, by the way.
Yes, I have a twin sister.
So
Yeah.
I kept them together in school up until middle school because Michelle, her twin, would know exactly when her blood sugar was low at school. And my mother was insulin dependent, though she died right after she was diagnosed. My mother wouldn't even go to the hospital initially when Danielle was put in the hospital because she said she's going to hate me. This is my fault. And she wouldn't even go to the hospital. But my mother died right after she was diagnosed, maybe a year or so after my mother was 50 when she died. Yeah. So go ahead, Danielle.
How old were you again, Danielle, when you were diagnosed?
I was 5 when I was diagnosed. We were just talking about the date, actually. So I will hit 33 years on March 28th. My first ever blood sugar was 940. The night that I was diagnosed, I was over at my aunt's house and drank a lot of Pepsi. And she used to make me these little half cheese sandwiches. And I ate, that's all I kept eating was these half cheese sandwiches. And because my grandmother had her ketone strips at my aunt's house, my aunt was like, something's wrong, let's test. And she said that it turned jet black. I think my grandmother came over and they checked my blood sugar, and her old meter only read high. Beyond 200 was it read high, and immediately took me to the hospital.
Actually, me and your daddy were out to eat. They called us and we come home. And my first son, they thought was going to develop diabetes. When he was younger, he had had some problems. And so they did a glucose tolerance test. I don't even think they do those anymore, where they would make them drink sugar water, draw their blood. And I think he was 2 at the time. And he had been ketotic for about a week. And then we did the glucose tolerance test and he was fine. And it never crossed my mind until this happened with Danielle. And whenever I talked to the pediatrician, I said, Danielle's got a high blood sugar. He said, it's probably like Brett. Bring her to the hospital. Everything's going to be fine. But it wasn't fine. So they still can't explain how my son escaped it. But all three children had a viral illness 3 weeks before she was diagnosed. And you've probably done some reading on the viral theory. And then Danielle, then this happened. But you said it, the whole family has diabetes, not just your daughter, because you're not eating candy or doing things in front of her. So everybody has the disease. They're just the ones that takes the insulin.
That's very true. Great way to put it. Absolutely. The whole family.
Yep. And you're right. You never sleep again. And you still don't sleep after her eye surgery while she had a retinal detachment. So I was up there when she had her surgery, and her husband comes to the bedroom, and I go, nope, you're sleeping somewhere else. I'm sleeping with her tonight. And so I got into her phone and I hooked my phone.
Look, okay, time out, time out. So I purposely did not tell her about the Dexcom G6 capability of having other users follow your blood sugars. Now, my sister knew this and she was like, if you make me mad, I'm going to tell mom. I was like, no, let's not do this. And so while I was under surgery, she did this. Add her, because she's a little bit of a hover parent, which I think most diabetic parents are. A week or so later, she had flown back to North Carolina, and I reside here in Minnesota. And I happened to have a low blood sugar. My phone was going off. I was eating something, went back to lay back down because it was really late. And then my husband goes, your mother is calling me. Why is she calling me? And I answer the phone. And that's where we discovered that she had uploaded the app and was now following my blood sugars. So even now, when my blood sugar is out of range, she texts me like, what's going on?
It never ends. All right, let's go back. Tell us about your journey to start this online presence and why you wanted to do that.
I still remember the day that I was at work actually, and I was on my lunch break. I was just scrolling through my news feed, and I saw this press release pop up saying Vertex Pharmaceuticals has a patient that's 90% off insulin right now. And I was like, whoa. And I immediately clicked on it, and the entire world could have just stopped spinning and I wouldn't have noticed. I was just glued to this article, and that lit a fire under me. And that article in and of itself was the biggest news to hit the type 1 diabetes community since the discovery of insulin, in my opinion, which was 100 plus years ago. I couldn't believe what I was reading. There's somebody that's 90% off insulin, which means they're probably going to be completely off insulin soon, which is exactly what happened. So I looked around in the community. I said, who's talking about this? And I went to every diabetes group I could find on Facebook. And from what I could tell, these were great forums for people to come to when they had questions, great community, tens of thousands of years of experience collectively when you have these ginormous groups of people. And I couldn't find one that's focused specifically on talking about curing type 1 diabetes and the research that was going on at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. I kept looking for months and months, and I eventually just decided to start it myself because I couldn't find it. So I started a group called Crushing T1 on Facebook. I still remember back when we had like 50 people in the group. I would post anytime there was a significant update, anything newsworthy worth talking about. Every single press release that came out, I was talking about it. I would kind of break it down into layman's terms. I love science, and I feel like that's a strength of mine to be able to take something that's complex and break it down for the average person in the type 1 diabetes community to understand. And there's also a lot of fluff and noise out there that you have to filter through. There's strange articles popping up all the time about curing diabetes, and you just have to filter through some of that noise. So I started the group, and it just started growing and growing, and we're at almost 13,000 people now from almost every country. I think we have every country of the world represented. And I was doing that full time. I was focused on the Facebook group, but I would say about, 6 months ago, I decided to start making TikTok videos. It's a lot easier just to make a video and explain something than it is to type up a long Facebook post. And I can also show visuals, with like a green screen background. I can show these articles I'm talking about. So I started making videos. And so now I do a combination of both. And my TikTok channel just kind of exploded from nothing to almost 85,000 people now. People are following both groups every day from all over the world. Anytime there's something worth talking about, my followers will hear about it the same day from me. So I wanted someone else to start this group, but nobody did. So I did it myself.
6 months on TikTok, that's pretty impressive growth, I would think. Not that I know a whole lot about TikTok, but 6 months to grow to greater than 80,000. That's pretty amazing. So what other research is going on right now that has piqued your interest?
Yeah. So I can talk about maybe the top 3 people that are in the lead right now. Number 1 is Eledon Pharmaceuticals. They are based out of Irvine, California, and they have a new drug. It's not new, but it's called tegoprubart. And they have a fascinating story about this drug. If you dig back to 1997, there was a version of this drug that they called AT-1501. They were trying to cure 40 monkeys of type 1 diabetes. They gave these monkeys diabetes with streptozotocin, chemically induced, and then they put them on this drug. It was not called tegoprubart at the time. It was called AT-1501. You can actually watch YouTube videos of NBC News. Dan Rather did a big story on it. And there's these 2 guys in Navy uniforms sitting there next to him that he's interviewing about it because the Navy was doing the trial. They were curing monkeys of type 1 diabetes, but some of the monkeys were getting pulmonary embolisms and dying. So the whole program got kiboshed. And it wasn't until not too long ago that it got resurrected. This molecule was completely re-engineered. They took one of the stalks on the molecule, they removed it, they identified the problem stalk that was triggering platelet activation, and they attached a new molecule in that spot. And this is the drug that came about the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. You guys remember seeing those videos online of all the people pouring ice water on their heads? This is the drug that came from that humongous fundraising effort.
Wow.
So a lot of ALS patients were put on this drug several years ago. And based on the data I've seen most recently, it hasn't cured ALS, but it has slowed the progression of it by around 30% or so. I just interviewed the CEO of Eledon Pharmaceuticals 2-3 weeks ago, and he said that that program is not gone. They're still going to come back to it, but they're focusing right now on type 1 diabetes and kidney transplant. They have 2 trials going right now. For type 1, they've cured 5 people. There should be a 6th one announced soon. And what they do is they put them on this medication, tegoprubart, which is a T and B cell, prevents activation of a T and B cell. It's a CD40 ligand inhibitor. So it goes and finds these CD40 ligand receptors on T and B cells. It attaches to them and it prevents them from becoming activated. That activation is a key driver of type 1 diabetes and how it all begins. So if you can stop that from even beginning, then the immune system will not go and attack the beta cells. So they put a patient on this drug 2 to 3 weeks before the islet cell transplant. And they're doing this at the University of Chicago right now. And then they wait for the transplant to become available. They give them the cells, and they are seeing these patients become insulin independent within 3 to 4 weeks. The most recent one was 3 weeks.
So the problem in the old days with the islet cell transplants is their body would attack it again and kill it all over again since it's autoimmune. So this drug they take to keep from killing the newly introduced islet cells. Did I get that right?
Kind of. Let me clarify. So islet cell transplant is not approved in the FDA by the FDA in the United States. It's approved in Canada, China, most European countries, but not the United States. And I believe the reason is largely because the current drug used for any transplant is tacrolimus. Tacrolimus is a CNI inhibitor, and it is a terrible drug with terrible side effects. It leads to nephro and neurotoxicity over time, hypertension.
You're trading one disease for another.
I've got more side effects to list. Tremors. 30% of people on TAC get debilitating tremors, and it causes type 2 diabetes, insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes. And the reason for that is because tacrolimus is actually toxic to the beta cell that produces insulin themselves. It interferes with the mitochondrial function of the beta cell. It interferes with its ability to produce ATP. So thereby it's not producing enough oxygen to produce enough insulin. It's a cascading effect. You decrease ATP production, thereby decreasing oxygen production inside the cell, which limits the amount of insulin granules that these beta cells can release from their cell walls. That's pretty counterproductive for a drug to be given to someone to protect a beta cell that's also very much limiting its function and potential. That's why this new drug is so exciting, because it has none of those toxicities. It does not interfere with the mitochondrial function of a beta cell. And that is why we are seeing patients being completely taken off insulin within 3 to 4 weeks.
So where are these people getting their islet cells from if you can't get them in the United States? Are they going somewhere else and getting it and then getting on the drug? Or is this study all inclusive? We'll get your islet cells if you'll take our drug.
So they're cadaveric islet cells right now. They have to wait for a pancreas to become available from a donor. And so the protocol for the current trial is they fly them out to Chicago. They put them on tegoprubart, and there's 1 or 2 other medications they're putting them on as well, but they're not toxic or anything. They're just commonly used with any organ transplant. I think mycophenolate is one of them, but I can assure you they will be testing tegoprubart as a monotherapy in the not too distant future, because that's what all the monkeys were on. They were just on tegoprubart itself, and it was working. So they go back home and they wait for the next call when the pancreas is available, and then they fly him back. And they go into the interventional radiology suite with Dr. Piotr Witkowski, who's a Polish doctor. He's one of my heroes. I've talked to him on the phone once, and it was like Christmas being able to talk to him. He has dedicated his whole life to curing this disease, as have many others. He brings them in there and infuses the cells into their portal vein. Portal vein feeds the liver and pancreas. Most of these cells go and get stuck in the microcirculation of the liver, and they already have the tegoprubart in their system. And so they observe them for several days, and then they send them back home. And Dr. Witkowski is very closely monitoring how much insulin they should be taking, because I learned this from the CEO a couple weeks ago. They are seeing good glucose control within 48 to 72 hours after they get their cell. That's how quickly the beta cells start working on tegoprubart, this new drug, because the mitochondrial function isn't being interfered with. And it's amazing what a beta cell can do if you just let it do its job. And tacrolimus, on the other hand, it can take 3 to 6 plus months to achieve insulin independence. And even at that point, the beta cells still aren't pumping out as much insulin as they could be if they weren't toxic to the beta cells themselves. What does that mean for the future? That means that we need to find a cell source, and Vertex Pharmaceuticals is that cell source. Vertex has this guy working for them named Doug Melton, and I call him the father of the beta cell. 25, 30 years ago, he was studying the embryonic origin of frogs, and then his daughter got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and he changed course immediately. He said, I want to cure this disease. And a few years later, his son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Now he has 2 kids, and for the past 25 plus years, he has been trying to figure out how to take a stem cell and mature it into a fully functioning islet cell, beta cell, alpha, delta cells. And it wasn't until 2014 that he was finally successful. The way they had their lab set up was these cells were in petri dishes, and if they produced insulin, they would turn blue. And there was an article in the mainstream media about this a few years ago. This is how I know this. So it was late Friday night in the lab, and one of the lab techs was closing up the lab, and she noticed one of the petri dishes had turned blue, and she freaked out, called everybody in. They came in and realized for the first time they had created a beta cell that's producing insulin from a stem cell. And for the past 10 plus years, they have just been perfecting that process. And now they have figured out how to create, so beta cells produce insulin, alpha cells produce glucagon, and delta cells produce somatostatin that kind of help keep insulin and glucagon levels in check with each other. And you really only need those 3 to control the blood sugar. It's nice to have amylin, which is also produced by a cadaveric beta cell or a non-type 1 diabetic beta cell, but it's not essential for glucose management. Amylin helps you feel full. The exciting thing is Vertex, about 2.5 years ago, they announced the construction of this huge building in New Hampshire, where the primary function of this building was to pump out these cells in the billions of quantities. And they have a collaboration with a company in London called Tree Frog that has this proprietary technology to be able to take stem cell products and mass produce them in the millions and billions. And so they collaborated with Tree Frog about 2-3 years ago. And this facility in New Hampshire, it's in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It's going to be done next year. It looks done now from the outside. I have my spies watching the building. I had a friend of mine go last year when it was still, the shell was up, but the interior was still a dirt floor. I had him go knock on the construction trailer because he was doing a CRNA locums gig like an hour away. I said, you got to drive out there and get me some video and pictures of this place that I can share with my group. And so he goes and knocks on the construction trailer, and they took him on a ride in their golf cart and took him inside and let him take all the pictures and video that he wanted.
Nice, nice. So the drug is there to keep the body from attacking it. Now, islet cells. Now, when you say cadaveric, they've still got to be brain dead donors, because doesn't blood have to be coursing through those islet cells? You can't harvest them from just dead people. Aren't the islet cells dead?
The way that they're taken from a donor and turned into a bag of islet cells, it's a whole process. They use a bunch of digestive enzymes to break down the pancreas, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 pancreases to get enough.
I used to be up into my eyeballs reading about all this stuff. I did it for years and years. So dead pancreas, I know they dissolve it, and beta cells look like sand, and it does usually take several. But those people, like, you can go to the morgue and get somebody's pancreas. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, it's from a donor they're on life support.
Okay. So just like an organ donor. Okay. That's what I thought. So that would be severely limiting on getting enough islet cells. So this thing in New Hampshire sounds promising.
It's absolutely one of the big reasons why we don't have a cure for type 1 diabetes, is because we don't have enough cells. If we're going to cure 10 million people worldwide, 2 million of which are in the United States, you got to be able to scale the production of these stem cells in the millions and billions. Every patient needs several million of these cells. Vertex is doing their own trial right now, and that was the other company I was going to mention. Their trial is called VX-880. Their trial has been going since like 2021. The reason why it's taken so long is because their patients are on tacrolimus, the bad drug. And so it's taking much longer to become insulin independent. You've got all these side effects to worry about as well down the road for these patients. I get messages almost every day from people that are on a kidney transplant who are on tacrolimus, and they just complain about all their side effects, their tremors. It's terrible. So the Vertex trial is exciting, but they have one piece of the puzzle that is very exciting, and that's the stem cell source. The tacrolimus their patients are on is not exciting. That's not good. You can't put kids on that for sure. What's going to happen is they're going to have enough data next year to approach the FDA about approval, and they are likely going to be approved, but it's going to be for a small subset of type 1 diabetics. And it's going to be for people who, the way they've described it is they have to be like very brittle diabetics, kind of with nothing to lose. They also talk about having severe hypoglycemic events. If they're having a certain number of those, they might qualify for this. They estimate that about 60,000 people could be eligible for this therapy. So they're going to try to bring this first therapy to the market. They're going to try to get approval for VX-880. They've already named it. It's called Zamislacel. If I'm not butchering that, it's something close to that. So they've given it a name. They've been hiring a marketing team for the past year in anticipation of this drug to be approved, this therapy to be approved. I don't have any insider knowledge, but I'm so close to all of this, and I spent all of my time researching it. I can tell you they have their eye on Eledon Pharmaceuticals and their drug tegoprubart. And they've hinted several times publicly that improved immunosuppression is in their future. So what they're going to do is they're going to get approval first with tacrolimus. And then what I believe is going to happen is they're going to have some type of collaboration with Eledon. I don't know if they're going to buy them outright or if they're going to collaborate, some licensing deal with them. But both of these companies have one half of the cure.
Yeah, they need to get married.
They need to get married. I can't sleep at night knowing that Vertex has not acquired Eledon Pharmaceuticals. It keeps me up every night thinking about it. But You have to keep in mind that they are laser focused on FDA approval right now for their first therapy, and they have to be very careful what they say. They've already hinted more times than I think they should at what their future intentions are. I believe that they will do some type of collaboration with Eledon, and they will upgrade this therapy. And when I say upgrade, I'm talking we're going from here up to here.
So, how do they get their funding? Do you know how each of these companies how are they funded? Because the NIH cannot be held accountable, because for every diabetic patient used to be only $20 was allocated to research. When AIDS first came out, it was $2,200 per patient that was allocated towards research. That's how the research dollars broke down through the NIH, because people think that diabetes is cured because we've got insulin. And I did see one of your TikToks, it's just life support. And I agree. I've said that for years and years and years. We're not putting our money where our mouth is as far as the disease. Other diseases get more money looking for cures. So where are they getting their money to do this research?
Vertex has gotten their money from their cystic fibrosis drug line. That has made many, many billions of dollars. I'm not an expert on cystic fibrosis, but my understanding is there's 3 main subtypes of the disease. So there's 3 main medications that treat those different subtypes, and they've combined them into one. I think it's called Trikafta or something like that. And that drug is amazing for patients with cystic fibrosis because it covers a lot of bases with these different subtypes of CF. Anyway, they've made billions and billions off that drug. And so I know they've put in at least $2 billion to curing type 1 diabetes. So Vertex has the cash themselves. Last time I checked, I think they had 13 billion in cash and just growing all the time with this CF income. And Eledon Pharmaceuticals is a publicly traded company, and they've had to raise money themselves. They are a very small biotech startup company compared to Vertex, one of the big dogs. So that's what I have my eye on, is these 2 companies hopefully partnering together. Another thing to keep in mind is there's a company called Cernova, and they are trying to cure type 1 as well. Their CEO, Jonathan Rigby, has type 1 diabetes, and they have this cell pouch system that he's trying to cure type 1 diabetics with. The problem with encapsulating these cells in a pouch is you get what's called the foreign body response. That prevents oxygen from coming into the cells. Once that foreign body response, once all that fibrin builds up around these capsules, around these pouches. Vertex tried the same thing. They had their own trial called VX264 that they discontinued last year because nobody has been able to beat encapsulation yet. The idea is that it would be great to have a pouch of these cells that you could stick in your abdomen or your forearm, and both locations have been tried. Vertex's was the abdomen. Nobody's been successful. So Cernova has a pouch, and they have a slightly different method where they will surgically implant the pouch and allow blood vessel growth onto it. Then they will inject the cells later on once there's a lot of blood vessels on the pouch, hoping that there's enough oxygen delivery to these cells. But a lot of their patients also needed a portal vein top-off to become insulin independent. And I'm talking like 6 to 8 patients that are in this trial. From what I understand, most of them have required a portal vein top-off to go off insulin, which is essentially what Vertex is doing when they inject into the portal vein. But Eledon just collaborated with Cernova, and I believe that's potentially because Cernova has a partnership with another company called Evotech. Evotech is a company that is trying to make stem cell-based islet cells like Vertex has. They entered a collaboration in 2022, I believe, and I still haven't seen evidence that they have islet cells, stem cell-based islet cells that they can produce on a massive scale. Maybe they're close to that. Maybe they have them and they haven't released it, or maybe they don't have it. I don't know. But if they do show that they have these cells, you have the cure right there. You have Eledon's drug tegoprubart, and you have Evotech that's collaborated with Cernova. So that's another marriage made in heaven, potentially. Third or fourth company I wanted to mention was Sana. Sana Biotech is in Seattle. Their approach is extremely exciting because it's just genetically modifying the beta cell. They made several edits to a beta cell. They removed the MHC1 and 2 receptors on the beta cell wall to disguise it from the immune system. They overexpressed a gene called CD47, which is like it basically gets the immune system to calm down. And so they thought if they just turn that gene up to the max and then they remove proteins on the cell wall, that the T and B cells won't recognize the beta cell. What they did is there's a guy in Sweden, he's like 41 years old, and they implanted a very small number of these cells into his forearm, into his brachioradialis muscle right here. We're like 8 or 9 months after that happened as of right now. And the most recent update we have is the 6-month update. And that shows that the cells are still producing insulin, but they only gave him about 5% of the dose needed to actually regulate blood sugar. So he's not cured, but they're trying to establish proof of concept to see if these cells can hide from the immune system. And so far, it seems like they are, but they haven't cured anybody yet. And they're going to have to prove that this theory of theirs, this technology that they have applied to these small number of cells, works on stem cell-based islet cells. Because this tiny little amount of cells in this guy's arm, they're cadaveric cells that they genetically modified. In order to cure millions of people, they're going to have to do it with stem cell-based islet cells that could be given to millions of people. And then they have to prove that it can actually regulate the blood sugar.
So I'm hearing it's a little ways off.
They've got several hoops to jump through, and I'm cheering for them big time. But I just know that there's some hoops, some significant hoops they need to jump through, and I really hope they're successful. It would be very exciting if they are, but there's definitely some obstacles in their way before they cure anybody, and they haven't cured anybody yet. So Eledon's cured 5, almost 6 people, and by the end of the year, we're going to hear between 9 and 12 people have been cured from Eledon's therapy. The CEO told me that a couple weeks ago, and I have people in my groups that have messaged me telling me, I just got the email, I'm going. I had a woman message me 2 days ago saying she's going next week to start the trial. And then I had someone else reach out to me and tell me their husband got in and he's starting the trial. And so I get a lot of messages from people, a lot of inside knowledge. People tell me everything. So that's another reason why I know a lot of this stuff beyond my own research.
My question is, what are the requirements? For example, I believe you were talking about Eledon, someone like me who has been afflicted for 32 years. I have other issues that have, diabetes is the gift that just keeps on giving, as I love to say. I suffer from a detached retina. I mean, thankfully, my A1C, I'm within control. I'm at a 6.2. I typically range between a 6.0 to a 6.6. So I kind of stay on the lower end, thank God. But, what are their parameters? I know you
To
talked
join the study.
Yes, to do the study. Like, is there a cutoff date? Are they like freshly diagnosed? Or are they like veterans?
Everyone that I've heard of are you talking about Eledon specifically?
I believe Eledon was the one that you were talking about, suffered with a lot of high blood sugars issues. Controlling, is that the one? I may have gotten them confused, so I do apologize.
Sorry, I'm jumping around these companies a lot and a little bit of crossover, but for most of these people that I've heard of have been cured, whether it's the Vertex or the Eledon trial. I want to say the A1C has to be above like 7.5, I think. Don't quote me 100% on that, but I think that's a ballpark. And then there's a total daily insulin dose that you have to be under, I believe, to be in the trial. So yeah, there's certain criteria that they have to meet. And then they look at your blood type as well with the Vertex trial. I think they're focused on one specific blood type. And I think that's because of the specific stem cell product that they're trialing right now. I think they're going to be able to eventually serve all blood types, but I think they're working on like one blood type at a time. One other thing I wanted to mention with this Eledon drug is people hear the word immunosuppression and they get scared by it. And so I want to explain a little bit about what this drug does. It blocks T and B cell activation, but it leaves like other immune pathways like macrophages, dendrites, natural killer cells. It leaves all of those pathways alone. You could make the argument that it dampens the immune system a little through one pathway of T and B cell activation, but tacrolimus, on the other hand, globally suppresses the entire immune system. Every single pathway is affected with tacrolimus. So with tegoprubart, this Eledon drug, you're led to ask the question, are the patients getting sick? Are they getting infections? Are they getting cancers? And so far, no. We have about 20 years of patient safety data to look at, including the ALS patients and the kidney transplant patients and the type 1 diabetes patients. The only cancer that has occurred in any of those patients was one ALS patient got a thyroid nodule that it was a small surgical procedure that they cut out. No malignancies, nothing else. And that's not statistically significant.
And they may have gotten it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing concerning has popped up that would cause them to halt the trial. If patients were getting cancers or getting an increased number of infections, they would have paused the trial already and investigated it thoroughly. And that has not happened. So that's very good. Eledon's plan is to bring this drug to market and replace tacrolimus. They want to replace this horrible drug that's used for all transplant. They want to do it for kidney. Next is liver. They just finished their monkey liver trial, which showed phenomenal results. And the kidney results, by the way, are incredible. The average GFR of a tacro kidney is low 50s. What their data is showing is high 60s, low 70s GFR with tegoprubart. And we're actually going to get the phase 2 data on the kidney transplant released November 6th is the day.
So, Devin, as we kind of wrap this up here, before I let you go, Danielle, since you fangirled, what is it that you want to ask Devin?
As a parent, your goal is for your child to be cured of this disease. Do you anticipate that's going to be something that's going to happen next 10 to 15 years, maybe in your child's lifetime?
So Caroline is 6 right now, and she will be cured before she's 12. I can say that with 100% certainty based on everything I know.
Well, that's good news, Danielle.
That is good news.
I've been waiting for a long time. As we wrap up, Devin, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with outside of this great news that within 6 years, your daughter's going to be cured, which is great news to another parent of a diabetic child?
Yeah, and that's the same for you, Danielle. I think that we've only got a few more years of this awful disease. Is there worse things that can happen to someone? Of course there are, but on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute management of a disease, I don't know of a disease that's more difficult or more life-threatening than type 1 diabetes. And you don't understand it unless your own child gets it. You have no clue. You live in complete delusion and denial about what this disease is, unless you have it or unless your child has it. And Sharon, you're my hero because you managed this disease back in the dark ages without any technology available to us now. I don't know how you did it. I legitimately do not know how you did that. So you're my hero.
Well, thank you. I am the only parent of the doctor that she had. I spreadsheeted every blood sugar she ever had, and it was in a big binder.
Which I have said binder. Like I have it now. So, and it literally has a picture of me on the front. I'm talking about even the letter the doctor sent, my original hospital information saying what my blood sugar was and
Everything. Every time she ever went to the doctor, she was in the Duke program. And so finally, she must have been about 18, and she had gone to her appointment, and I stopped by just to check it out. And her doctor, whom we loved, who,
Dr.
by the way,
Marian Morris.
interestingly, died of pancreatic CA, and she was endocrinologist. I mean, what a slap in the face. And she diagnosed her own pancreatic cancer. But I stopped by the office. Hey, so good to see you. She took me in the office. She said, Sharon, listen, nobody I've ever known has managed their kid as well as you have, but this is her disease, and you've got to stop it. And that was hard, clearly. But it's interesting, Devin. I grew up across the street from my grandparents, and I watched my mother, who was diagnosed at 14, and her mother's relationship. Because there was sometimes I would come home and my mother wouldn't wake up. She's just, and so I'd call my grandmother across the street. And, we were young. We'd get off school bus and she was having a low and wouldn't wake up. We just always knew that if we couldn't wake her up, call my grandmother, or if she could eat, give her a sandwich, whatever. I mean, my mother still boiled her syringes, had the metal needles that she had to use an emery board on to make them sharp enough.
Yep, I've heard about that.
The urine, to see if she was spilling ketones, she would put like 8 drops of urine on this tablet, and if it bubbled, blue. I mean, that was really, really the dark ages. I remember when she first got her first glucometer was when my children were small.
I used her old glucometer. And in fact, when I was initially diagnosed, I was on pork insulin.
Really? Wow.
Oh, yeah, which was great. I could keep her under great control. Now, when she went to kindergarten, because she had to do a regular MPH, she'd have to eat her snack. And so I would put 2 watches on her that would alarm at 10 a.m. to remind her to eat her snack and at 2 p.m. to eat her afternoon snack when her regular insulin was peaking. Now, I did not take the route that you have looking at research, etc. What I did, and I understand where you're coming from because you can't fix this. You just can't fix it. So you're doing what you can to help yourself because you can't fix your daughter. You would take it if you could. I know that. But in North Carolina, kids were not allowed to take care of their diabetes in the school system. So I passed a bill in North Carolina called the Care for School Children with Diabetes Act. We were the 4th state in the nation to pass this bill, allowed children to take care of their diabetes in the school system. And it also provides for every public school there's got to be at least 2 people trained in diabetes care. Back when Danielle was in school, the solution was if she had a low blood sugar, call the ambulance. Well, then you know how that went. They'd come get her. They take her to the hospital. Takes you hours to get her out of the system once she's taken. Why couldn't she have somebody to help her at the school? So we passed that bill and it was signed into law in 2002. And other states have passed that. So that's how I helped heal myself, just like that's exactly what you're doing. I recognize it for what it is because you feel like you've got to do something. I raised money through JDRF. I started a walkathon, raised $500,000 for research through JDRF because you just feel like I got to do something. I've got to do something.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thank you so much for all of the legislation and advocacy you've done for the community.
Well, what you are doing is amazing. I can feel your passion for this, and I know where it's mediated from because you would do anything. Like I said, you would take it on you. I know that, but you can't. So this is what you're doing, and I appreciate everything that you are doing. Appreciate everything you're doing for this community, and I hope you're right. I've been waiting since my mother. I never knew another life except having a mother with diabetes.
Thinking back to way back then when I was initially diagnosed and where we've come so far, back then I was the youngest diabetic to get put on an insulin pump in North Carolina. And it was Deezatronic was my first insulin pump. And I had to write a letter to the company saying that I was responsible enough to take on handling that equipment. And now these days, didn't have the continuous monitors like we do now. We didn't have this, we didn't have that. And now just seeing the presence of a community that it was me and 2 other students in my entire school that had diabetes, and I was the only female. So, kind of seeing the evolution of this community has been amazing to me because, again, I didn't grow up with that. I mean, of course, my grandmother had it, but, it's different being a kid and having to go to birthday parties and, oh, you can't eat icing. And, back then I had such restrictions on eating. And, I know it breaks mama's heart to know that, like, oh, I can't have icing at this birthday party. Yeah, once I got put on the insulin pump, I'm not going to lie, I got fat because I went to town on food. I could eat anytime I wanted. I didn't have to get up at a certain time. What was that? I'd be up at 7 to have my injection by 7:30. So even now I have a biological clock that I wake up at 7 and then I'll go back to sleep afterwards. But, it's just things that you deal with.
I almost feel guilty with the technology we have available now, listening to you talk about what you had available to you when you were diagnosed. The last thing I want to leave everybody with is this is all very new research. If you were talking about curing type 1 diabetes before 2021, you had no business talking about it. There was nothing to talk about. I probably hear this more than anything from my followers. Yeah, my doctor told me it's 5 more years until I'm cured. That was 30 years ago. That was 40 years ago. That was 50 years ago. That was 10 years ago. 5 more years has always been the joke. I'm sure you guys have heard it a million times. My point is, if you were saying anything about curing type 1 diabetes before 2021, when Vertex got their patient 90% and then shortly thereafter 100% off insulin, you had no business doing that. And I'm upset with any doctor who was talking like that. There was nothing to be excited about before that time. But we have entered a new age of diabetes research. It's okay to talk about that now. The type 1 community is split right now. There's a lot of people that are on my side of hoping that it's going to be cured soon and convinced that that's going to happen. And then there's people that say, absolutely not. Wake me up when it happens and I'll be pleasantly surprised. And then there's everyone in between that. I have someone in my phone right now that I could call or text who's been cured of type 1 diabetes. She was one of the first 3 patients in the Eledon trial. Her name's Marlena, and I check up with her every couple weeks. And she threw her insulin pump away 14 months ago. She threw her CGMs away. She doesn't have any diabetes supplies in her house anymore, and she's doing phenomenally well. She goes and gets her tegoprubart infusion every 3 weeks to keep her cells alive. And the CEO of Eledon told me that the company just finished trialing the subcutaneous version on monkeys for the drug. This is a drug that you will potentially be able to just pull a vial out of your fridge, like a GLP-1, inject it into your belly, take your monthly injection, and continue on. And there's even anecdotal evidence that you may not even have to take it forever, because some of the monkeys were taken off the drug and their sugar still was in control. And they believe that's because of T regulatory cells that the body produced to protect the islet cells. Isn't that crazy, though, that this disease that has plagued humankind for thousands of years, we have ancient records in Egyptian papyri talking about it, serious disease that causes excessive urination and thirst and rapid weight
They called
loss.
it the watering hole, disease, the
Yeah.
watering bird
Well,
disease.
yeah.
Modern
The
would
kids would sit by the well and drink themselves to death.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are keeping our fingers crossed. I want to see this, but I appreciate you joining us tonight to tape this podcast. Danielle, thank you for finding Devin for me. And with that, it's a wrap.